This time of year is always really interesting because we move from Cancer season into Leo. Cancer is the sign that initiates the season of summer. It starts with the summer solstice, and it's that like beginning of a new season, and it's ruled by the moon. And immediately after Cancer season, we have Leo season, the sign that sustains the summer energy. It is a sign of like maximum summering, and it's ruled by the sun. Cancer season tends to have that more internal, introspective, emotional, changeable kind of energy, which is very fluid. When we get into Leo season, we have a little bit, it's one of the fixed signs, so we have a little bit more of that like direction. We have a focus. We have a purpose or a guiding like North Star that we are aiming towards. As with all the fixed signs, there's that kind of commitment to an ideal. I think we tend to find what that purpose or ideal is during Cancer season, especially this Cancer season, because we had Mercury retrograde in Cancer, where I feel like a lot of us in our own unique personal ways, based on the way that our chart operates, we're asked to like dig into something, unpack something, process something, explore something, right? And that could look differently for anyone. For some people, it might be like the way I organized my childhood photos. For someone else, it's, you know, the entire way that I think about my childhood, right? Like varying scales and ranges of things that we're really we poured our like emotional attention into. And I think we probably have come out of that journey. We're not necessarily like done with it yet, but we are coming out of that story with something that we learned, some little nugget that we found on our like treasure hunt into whatever we were digging into, to then be like, okay, now that I have this thing, this important clarity or revelation, aha moment, this answer to the question that I've been asking, or this like purpose that I hope to pursue, now we have the fixed, sustainable, committed energy of Leo season to go for it. And we are fully supported by the light of the sun that has all the energy and motivation and vitality for us to go down that path. An example, just because, you know, to kind of put practical words to the abstract concept. So my Cancer season / Mercury retrograde experience has been digging into things around like identity and like, who am I when there's no one around? And is that the same person that exists when people are around, right? Like, how does being perceived by somebody else change how I exist? And like, why don't they match? Should they match? Maybe in some cases, maybe not. But like, how do we close the gap between me at my core that exists no matter what, and the versions of me that exist in the world, right? I have a lot of Gemini placements. So like, there will never not be versions of me. I don't think strong Gemini placements are meant to be always the same. And there's an element of like unshakability of like certain core things that, you know, we look back on some life experiences and we're like, maybe not every choice has been as aligned as I have told myself it was. And how are we going to do something different with that? So with that little nugget of information of like, okay, my values were X, right? I have Cancer in the second house, so like it's all about values. My values are X, my actions were F. How do we get them like on the same page? And so to me, it feels like this Leo season process is going to be around showing up for that nugget consistently. And because it's Leo season, right? This isn't super serious time. It's how do we do that in a way that feels exciting, fun, creative, spacious, and like permissive, right? Not like you have to do these things this way because you must, but it's just kind of like, what if this was like the most fun I could be having, is exploring this one thing. So that's kind of the thing that I am feeling in terms of this Leo season in particular, that we're kind of in this, we all kind of were given like a quest during this Mercury retrograde. And now we get to start the quest. And like, how cool, right? Like how fun. We get to go on this adventure for ourselves, with ourselves. I'm going to bet that for a lot of us, there may be an element of creativity or self-expression to this. There might be an element of like connecting with the inner child. I think Cancer season, we like gave our inner child a hug, and Leo season, we're like, okay, little inner child, let's go play. Like, let's go out into the world. You don't have to stay in hiding anymore. You can be part of the party. I will say as well, just generally speaking, Leo season vibes, like it is one where we're invited to take up space, to be our like truest individual selves, to recognize that like being who we are is the most generous thing we can do, because we are here for a reason. We exist the way we do for a reason. And if we were to hide or avoid sharing the gifts that we have, we're withholding something delightful that other people want and maybe need. And maybe people are craving exactly who you are and how you do things, but we get shy, we doubt ourselves, we worry that we're being too big or being too much, or that like, oh, nobody actually wants to hear me talk about. Literally an example from yesterday, I spent a few minutes talking about why I feel so bad for pigeons. And I like, maybe not everybody cared as much as I did, but like I cared so much that I think by the end people felt something. And I think that's the thing. It's not like stopping yourself before you can start. It's just letting it happen. And if people don't end up reacting to it, that's fine. But you tried and you did and you gave. And I think that's the thing with Leo, of like just giving and letting people decide if they want to receive, not deciding for them if they're allowed to have it or not. So looking at the transits for this season, first thing to note, that Mercury goes direct the 23rd. What I always say, though, is that when Mercury goes direct, that doesn't mean that the whole Mercury retrograde story is over. It just means that Mercury has reached the end of its backwards journey, right? We think Mercury's over here, and he's like going forward, and then he's like, oops, I forgot something. And he retraces his steps backwards to a certain point. That's where he turns direct, which is, in this case, at 16 degrees Cancer. He has to retrace his steps again to get back to where he was when he turned around. And that's the point where we can say that the story has ended on the full Mercury retrograde thing. That date is August 6th, when Mercury gets back to 26 degrees of Cancer. So just noting, a lot of times we'll find that the day that Mercury turns direct, we feel like things aren't as hazy, things aren't as confusing, we're starting to get answers and things, but we're not finished, right? This is the point where we get to actually like integrate what we've been learning and processing. Come August 6th, Mercury will then get to 27 degrees of Cancer after that day, which is new territory. We're no longer bopping back and forth. So just noting that. But the 23rd is that moment when Mercury is like, okay, I got what I came here for, and now I'm going to go forward, right? Interesting thing about July is that I feel like a lot of people have been talking about Mercury retrograde, this Mercury retrograde being really big and like a big deal and whatever. True. But there's other stuff going on that we've been building up towards through June and July, and that continue for a little bit longer, that are also significant. So some of what we've been experiencing maybe was Mercury retrograde, maybe has been other astrology going on. One of those things is that the nodes are moving into Leo and Aquarius on July 26th. So we have had the nodes in Pisces and Virgo since, I don't have the dates right in front of my face, but it's usually like a 2 or 3 year-ish time frame that we have Virgos in a particular set of signs. So we've been in the Pisces Virgo part of our chart rewriting certain stories there for a little while. And we're now moving into a new storyline. So I'm going to go through, we're going to come back to this slide in a second, but let's talk about this. Starting off with the Virgo Pisces eclipses. We had eclipses in these signs between September 18th, 2024, and the last one in this cycle will be February 20th, 2027. So it's not completed yet, but we are in the like final phases. You might want to go through some of these dates and take a look at things that might have been happening, taking place, changing, specifically in the context of where Virgo and Pisces sit in your chart. Noting that that storyline is still happening, we have an eclipse here in Pisces at 4 degrees on August 28th, and then we'll have a Virgo eclipse in February. And the last time historically in our lives that we had Virgo Pisces eclipses was 2015 to 2017. So that's sometimes helpful too, to kind of figure out what the themes were for this set of eclipses, as well as the last one is looking, okay, last time we had eclipses here, like what was happening, what was changing, what was coming into my life, what was leaving, etc. So that's the storyline that will be shifting. When the nodes move out of Pisces and Virgo, they move backwards into Aquarius and Leo. This is the schedule for the Leo Aquarius eclipses. We had one back in February 17th, And we're having another this year, August 12th in Leo. The last time we had eclipses in these signs was 2016 through 2019. So again, looking back at that series of eclipses, we might pick up information that gives us insight into what this series of eclipses could be about. That's one thing. Okay, I'm going to spend just a tiny bit more time on the astrology before we get to the journaling. I will make sure that we have time to journal, but it's a big month. It's a big one. The other big thing isn't necessarily on this sheet, and I don't know, you may have seen this on the internet. This might be the first time you're hearing about it, but it's called Barbeau's basket. Okay, so Barbeau was a guy, he's a French guy, an astrologer, who in the 50s, I believe, did like a bunch of forward projecting astrology wise. He has like published writings where he predicted that in 2020, because of the astrology, there was likely to be a global pandemic. There were other examples of him being like, that astrology looks weird. I'm going to guess this happens. And he called it. I don't remember what they are. I didn't write them down. But he has paid attention to the future astrology, and he has named things that have happened, which, good job, Barbeau. That's pretty impressive. This is one of the things that he pinpointed. 4 of the major outer planets, all exactly at 4 degrees, forming what's called a basket. Pluto opposing Jupiter at 4 degrees, Leo and Aquarius. Then Jupiter and Uranus in Gemini making a sextile. Uranus and Neptune making a sextile. Neptune and Pluto making a sextile. Then Pluto and Uranus making a trine. Neptune and Jupiter making a trine. All that to say, they're all hanging out. They're all talking to each other. They are having like a dinner party, right? And like they're all just like chatting it up. All at exactly 4 degrees, which like generally speaking, when we have the outer planets making some kind of connection, it's pretty rare that they're all at exactly the same degree. A lot of times like we'll have things where like it's like almost perfect and then somebody moves a little faster and it's not quite right. This is like very precisely exactly correct. And these are all like major player outer planets in fire and air signs. We've had a lot of the important astrology over the past few years have been in water and earth signs. So this is also just like a shift in the energy, like energetically. Fire and air signs are buddies in that they are like, they're hot and they move quickly and they're not like bogged down in like feelings and practicality. They're like ready to pick up and switch things up quickly. They're fast, they're hot. And so I will say, I am not Barbeau's expert. Everything that I know about this, I have gathered from other spaces. So there are a lot of other astrologers that have more information and maybe better analysis on this than I do. If you want to learn more about it, I encourage you to do so because it is interesting. I think the general thing is that, or like at the very least, this is the summer where it all happens. What is it? I don't know. None of us know. And that's okay. I think this is very much just one of those astrology things that will be so clear when we look back on it. But right now, I think the only assignment that we have is to be curious, right? Where does it sit in our chart? Does it make any contact with planets that we have? Where could it be personal for us? But since most of these are our outer planets, right? Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, which are like the farthest ones, and then Jupiter comes in to complete the story, who's a little bit more personal, but he's still one of the outer planet players. This is something that is showing up for humanity, for the globe, for the earth, like for all of us, not necessarily for like Glalia and Sabrina and Laura. It could, and that's where we want to look at our charts. But generally speaking, this is a human experience. So we're all humans. We all live on this planet. We all are part of this like humankind. So it's going to show up for us. It just might not show up in our homes, in our lives, in our minds. It could just show up in our environments, in our cultures, in our societies. I also think this is not necessarily something that we are going to be like figuring it out today. This is a process of paying attention again to like what are the themes involved. So looking at it just really quickly, Jupiter and Leo, we're expanding our self-expression. Uranus and Gemini, we are reinventing our ideas and how we communicate them. Neptune in Aries, we are like redefining our beliefs and figuring out like what we're supposed to be fighting for. What are we passionate about believing and protecting? And then Pluto and Aquarius, what are the systems that we are revolutionizing for the greater good? And like, where are we fighting back against stuff that's not serving us? So it feels generally rebellious. It feels generally passionate. It feels generally like the old way of doing stuff is no longer the way. And what are we going to do about it? So again, looking at where this might show up in our charts. We want to see where Leo, Gemini, Aries, and Aquarius are. So that's 4 different houses that we're going to pay attention to. And we want to take note of if we have any planets at 4 degrees in those signs. Or I like to be generous with it, between like 2 to 6 degrees. The overall consensus is that Barbeau's basket is positive. Like Barbeau, when he talked about 2020, was like, ooh, that's going to be bad. That's going to be yucky. And like, no one's going to have a good time in 2020. His vibe about this was like, ooh, this is going to be exciting. Exciting can mean different things to different people. So obviously, like, it might not all be easy peasy lemon squeezy, but it's not going to be as like objectively garbage as 2020 was for essentially everyone. I have seen a lot of stuff about the basket. You probably have seen a lot of stuff online. I was listening to Aliza Kelly's podcast today, and she was talking about the basket because, of course, and she was talking about how, like, if someone's out there talking about the basket or astrology in general and being like pessimistic and making you worry, like, don't trust that astrologer, because like, why would you not like necessarily don't trust them, but like the whole point of this is to give us like the ability to create the reality that we want. And if the reality they're selling you is a negative one, like, you don't have to buy it. A lot of this in some ways feels like deciding to choose hope and to be optimistic is how we create the lives that we want. And starting with pessimism, starting with fear, starting with worry isn't the answer. Because even if I were to tell you like the basket's a little bit stressful, like, there's always an option for how you can work with it and have hope, optimism, make the most of what you've got, right? Because there's always something you can do. We always have agency. We always have choices. Our choices aren't always easy, and exercising our agency isn't always simple and fun and like no effort, but we do always have the choice to engage with life the way that we want, and we should be choosing what makes it feel possible and hopeful, and that makes us want to engage with it, as opposed to makes us want to crawl in a hole and do nothing. So offering that as our invitation. I also, this has never happened before, this exact configuration of like a basket with these planets. So like, we don't have reference points. Like, I can tell you the last time we had eclipses here, you can look at your life then and get a hint. Like, there are no hints for this. So we are all entering into this without a cheat sheet. And that just, I mean, that's not a bad thing. That's inherently neutral. But it does mean that we also don't want to come into it with like projecting our fears or our worries onto it, and be very open-minded about what could be possible, right? Any other 4 degrees placements that may not be in the basket, but could be still making a connection with one of these 4 planets, can also be like a way that we can explore the basket, play with the basket. So thank you all. I've said so many words, but it's like a big month, right? Like, there's like a lot of things. I didn't want to leave us without the opportunity to discuss all of it. I hope that was helpful. And at any point, if you're like, new questions have come up, talk to me, send me an email or a text or an Instagram message or whatever, so that we can talk about it. Because I also know that, like, again, we don't have historical references for the basket. So this will be something we'll want to keep being curious about. What we know today will be different than what we know in a week, in a month. And we might have more information then, or have lived through the basket in a way to where we can like play with it a little bit differently. The peak of the configuration is this week. So it is not like in the distant future. I think between like yesterday maybe and like the 27th is when like all of the planets are going to be exacting. And again, they're far enough away planets that like we can zoom in that the most energetic intensity maybe is this week, but I would argue that like plus or minus a week, it's still relevant, it's still present. Even like once, I think Jupiter is the fastest one, so it's probably going to get to 5 degrees in a couple of days. It's still kind of the basket. So like, even though it's not everything's at exactly 4 degrees, like I think this is a configuration that lasts long enough because of how slowly a lot of the planets move, that like this is kind of Leo season as a whole, and it could extend even into Virgo season a little bit, depending on how loose you want to be with the transits. So thank you for coming to my Barbeau talk instead of my TED talk.